It was a calm morning in Ouagadougou, when the skies above Burkina Faso were sliced by the thunderous sound of jet engines. Citizens looked up to behold a sight both unfamiliar and awe-inspiring. A Russian-made Ilyushin Il-96, jet bearing the insignia of the Russian Federation. The aircraft touched down gently on the runway of the Ouagadougou International Airport. It was not just any visit, it was a personal message from Vladimir Putin himself. Inside the airport's presidential lounge, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood still, his face calm yet thoughtful. The jet was not just a marvel of engineering, it was a symbol, a sign that the winds of global power were shifting, and Africa, long marginalized in international geopolitics, was now at the center of a new strategic realignment. A Russian diplomat stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Captain Traoré," he said with a thick accent, "President Putin awaits you in Moscow. He sends his respects and his plane." The captain turned to his security detail and advisors. Among them stood Colonel Sankara, a veteran strategist and loyal confidant, and Dr. Aminata Diarra, his chief economic advisor and an expert on Pan-African development. "We are not just visiting Russia," Captain Traoré said. "We are carrying Africa's dignity with us." As the plane soared into the sky, Captain Traoré sat near a large window, gazing over the clouds. The cabin was a blend of luxury and power, equipped with encrypted communication systems and books written in several languages, including French, Russian, and Arabic. A conversation sparked between Captain Traoré and Dr. Aminata. "What do you expect from Putin?" she asked. "I expect him to treat Africa with the respect it deserves," Traoré replied, "not as a pawn but as a partner." They reviewed Russia's involvement in Africa over the years, its Cold War history, support for liberation movements, and recent military collaborations in Mali, CAR, and now Burkina Faso. But this visit wasn't just about military aid, it was about something bigger, reshaping the post-colonial world order. The captain's arrival in Moscow was received with full state honors. The Russian anthem played alongside the Burkinabe national song. Snow fell gently as a red carpet was rolled out. President Vladimir Putin, dressed in his iconic black overcoat, stepped forward to greet Captain Traoré. The two leaders shook hands, firmly. Intensely, cameras flashed. History was being recorded in real time. Inside the Kremlin, the two men sat for hours, joined occasionally by aides and interpreters. The discussion ranged from defense cooperation to energy, mining, trade, and educational exchange. "You have stood against the empire," Putin said with a smirk, "and for that you have earned my respect." "I don't seek enemies," Traoré responded, "but I will not kneel before those who enslaved my ancestors." The room went silent for a moment, the air thick with reverence. Burkina Faso had recently expelled French troops and begun reclaiming its gold reserves. Putin offered advanced satellite surveillance systems, weapons, and cybersecurity assistance. But more importantly, he proposed something radical: a joint African-Russian gold exchange platform, free from IMF and World Bank oversight. "We create our own financial ecosystem," Putin explained. "A multipolar world needs multipolar currency anchors." Traoré nodded, then added, "And Africa needs its own sovereignty in digital infrastructure. No more spying from foreign servers." They signed an agreement that would enable African nations to route internet through new Russian-African satellites and undersea cables, bypassing Western surveillance hubs. Furthermore, Russian experts would help establish Burkina Faso's first space observatory and nuclear energy research facility. That night, in a quiet villa outside Moscow, Putin hosted a private dinner for Captain Traoré. On the menu, traditional Russian dishes infused with West African spices, specially prepared in honor of the visiting guest. "I read about Sankara," Putin said over a glass of Armenian brandy. "A visionary, they feared him so they silenced him. They'll try the same with me," Traoré responded. "But this time Africa is no longer asleep." The two men toasted, not to war, but to resistance, sovereignty, and the possibility of a new dawn. "From here on," Putin declared, "Russia and Burkina Faso shall walk as brothers in this new world." News of the meeting sent shockwaves across Europe and the United States. Western think tanks scrambled to understand the implications. NATO raised concerns. France, already humiliated in the Sahel, called an emergency parliamentary session. The African Union, surprisingly, remained silent, perhaps too afraid to challenge their Western donors. But on the streets of Lagos, Nairobi, Dakar, and Accra, people erupted in celebration. Murals of Traoré and Putin appeared in marketplaces. Youths began to dream again. In a press briefing from Ouagadougou, Colonel Sankara announced that a new alliance was in formation, the Pan-African Sovereignty Pact, backed by Russia and welcoming any African state ready to cut neo-colonial chains. When Captain Traoré returned to Burkina Faso, thousands flooded the airport to receive him. The plane had barely touched down when chants of Traoré, Sankara reborn, echoed across the city. Standing atop a military vehicle, he addressed the nation. "We have been to Moscow and we did not beg, we built. We stood tall and we were respected. Africa is no one's backyard anymore. We are the soil where new empires shall grow, not to conquer others but to liberate ourselves." The world now watched Burkina Faso not as a poor landlocked country, but as the beating heart of a rising movement. Traoré had become more than a president. He was a symbol, a flame. Putin, in a later address to the Russian Duma, stated, "Africa has awakened, and Russia shall be her sword and her shield if she asks." The future is not written in Washington or Paris anymore. It is being drafted in Ouagadougou, and thus began the new cold flame, a geopolitical reshuffle where courage, not capital, defined leadership. Traoré had lit the match, and Africa was ready to burn away the chains. As news of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's historic visit to Moscow rippled across television broadcasts and newspapers, it was the internet, more specifically, African content creators, that turned the story into a revolutionary wildfire. Across YouTube, TikTok, X formerly Twitter, and Instagram, creators from Accra to Addis Ababa, Lagos to Luanda, erupted with a surge of unfiltered patriotism and raw analysis. Traoré's firm handshake with Vladimir Putin became a symbol, shared, remixed and animated into countless videos, documentaries and street art. One Nigerian YouTuber, known simply as Afrolens, dropped a documentary within 24 hours of the news breaking. Titled The Moscow Pact, Africa's Turn to Rewrite the Rules, it blended cinematic visuals of Traoré's jet landing in Moscow with powerful historical flashbacks to the days of Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and Sankara. "This isn't just a meeting," Afrolens said in the video. "This is Africa finally talking to the world without begging." Traoré went to Moscow not as a puppet, but as a Pan-African lion, and the world better take notes. Within days, the video had over 5 million views and was being translated into Swahili, Arabic, Zulu, and Amharic. TikTok exploded with reenactments and skits. In Ghana, a content creator named Mama Africa posted a hilarious yet powerful video. A skit where colonial powers tried to stop Traoré from boarding the plane, only for him to disappear and reappear beside Putin with a contract labeled Africa First. Young African creators made mashups of Captain Traoré's speech in Moscow with Afrobeat music and traditional drums. One trending soundbite repeated across thousands of videos was Traoré's line, "Africa is no one's backyard anymore." Dances were made, slogans printed, hashtags trended. #Moscow Moment, Traoré the General, #Africa Reawakens, #Bye Bye Francafrique. Diaspora content creators in the US, UK, Brazil, and the Caribbean also joined the digital chorus. Jamaican vlogger Zion Warrior TV called it the most significant diplomatic event since the Bandung Conference, while a Haitian TikToker, Sister Solil, said Traoré didn't just go to Moscow, he took all of us with him. African Americans, who had long felt disconnected from the continent's political shifts, suddenly found renewed purpose. Influencers like Professor Amoale and Dr. Nina, Unchained, hosted live streams with thousands tuning in. "This is the Sankara of our era," Dr. Nina declared, "and this time, we're watching. They can't kill him in silence like they did the others. If they touch him, the whole diaspora rises." But the movement didn't go unchallenged. Western-backed media bots attempted to flood platforms with warnings about Russian manipulation and neo-imperial alliances. Yet for every sponsored post, 10 African creators responded with wit, facts, and fire. A Kenyan creator, Swahili Rebel, replied to a BBC Africa tweet with, "Y'all mad we're talking to someone who doesn't colonize? Stay pressed." Print-on-demand businesses exploded. Merch with phrases like, "I stand with Traoré," "Sankara walks again," and "Moscow was just the beginning" flooded marketplaces. Creators hosted virtual town halls and monetized through super chats and Patreon, finally turning Pan-Africanism into not just a mission, but a movement with a sustainable model. Seeing their power, Traoré's media team began quietly reaching out to select influencers. inviting them to Ouagadougou to document the ongoing transformation. The goal, to create Africa's first independent digital vanguard, a group of content creators dedicated to defending African sovereignty through truth, storytelling, and cultural pride. "Your camera is your rifle," said Colonel Sankara during a private meeting with them. "Your mic is your shield. We fight on the front lines, you fight in the timelines." Content creators were no longer just entertainers. They had become guardians of the narrative. And as the battle for Africa's soul moved from parliament halls and military barracks to digital screens and social media feeds, one thing was clear. Captain Traoré may have gone to Moscow alone, but he returned with a digital army of millions.